Hey, wise guys, you think you know who's gone? Think again. We all remember James Gandolfini, but Tony Sirico, Burt Young, Frank Vincent, Paul Herman, nearly 50 actors from The Sopranos are dead, and the number keeps growing. Some were icons, others just had a few lines, but every one of them helped shape this show, and every loss hits differently. Is it just bad luck or something darker? A curse? I've gathered every name, every date, and every cause of death. Stick around. Some of these will shake you. Tony Soprano was the mob boss of his generation. A walking contradiction, violent yet vulnerable, charming yet terrifying. From the pilot's panic attacks to that unforgettable cut to black in the final scene, James Gandolfini was Tony. He gave us moments burned into pop culture forever, choking a guy with a wire over a college visit, that raw, desperate fight with Carmela during Whitecaps, or his brutal showdown with Ralphie over a dead horse. You felt every grunt, every sigh, every flicker of guilt or rage. He turned therapy sessions into battlegrounds and dinner tables into war zones. Nobody else could have done it. Nobody. But behind the scenes, Gandolfini was fighting his own demons. He struggled with substance abuse throughout his career. Alcohol, the works. He once disappeared for days in the middle of shooting The Sopranos. The crew had no idea where he was. Stories like that aren't fun to hear, but they make the brilliance of his performance even more staggering. He was giving everything he had to that role, even when he barely had anything left in the tank. His addiction wasn't a tabloid spectacle. It was quiet, messy, and ongoing, the kind of thing a lot of men deal with and bury deep. And then came the punchline that hurts in hindsight. During Christopher's intervention, Imperioli's character yells at Tony, "I'm gonna kill myself? The way you eat, you're gonna have a heart attack before you're 50. 10 years later, in 2013, Gandolfini died of a heart attack while vacationing in Rome with his teenage son. He was 51. There's no neat way to wrap that up. No lesson, no legacy quote, just a guy who gave the role of a lifetime everything he had. And maybe it took more than we ever realized. Rest easy, Jim. If you're a Sopranos fan, you don't forget Ginny Sack. Played with quiet dignity and warmth by Denise Barrino-Quinn, Ginny was the wife of Johnny Sack, one of the show's most complex and coldly calculating figures. But Ginny wasn't just a background character. She was a symbol of loyalty, of love, of pride, and, heartbreakingly, of the brutal price women pay for existing in the orbit of men like Johnny. Denise Barrino-Quinn wasn't an actress by trade. That's part of what made her performance so memorable. She was a legal assistant from New Jersey who walked into an open casting call on a whim, just to support a friend. Somehow she ended up landing a role on one of the most iconic TV dramas of all time. It's the kind of thing that sounds like urban legend, but it's true. Off-screen, Denise lived far from the limelight. She returned to a quieter life after The Sopranos wrapped, but her journey wasn't without hardship. In 2010, just 3 years after the show ended, Denise passed away from liver cancer. She was only 46. Here's something you might not know. After losing a significant amount of weight in the years following the show, Denise gave a short interview where she admitted she'd never expected her life to take such a strange, sudden detour into television. She said the show changed her, and not just because of the fame. It gave her confidence, a sense of purpose. Rest in peace, Dennis. John Costello played Jim Johnny Cakes, Piatouski, a short-order cook and volunteer firefighter in New Hampshire, who becomes the unlikely romantic interest of Vito Spatafore, the closeted mobster on the run. On paper, it sounds like a side plot. In practice, it was one of the boldest turns in The Sopranos' history. Costello brought quiet strength to a role that could have been reduced to a punchline. Instead, he helped humanize one of the show's darkest characters and briefly offered him something like redemption. What a lot of fans didn't know at the time is that Costello was a former FDNY firefighter himself. A Brooklyn native, he served the city for over a decade before stepping into acting. His casting in The Sopranos wasn't just good, it was authentic. The gear fit him like a second skin because it was, but real life didn't offer him the same kind of hopeful arc he brought to the screen. In December 2008, just 2 years after his run on The Sopranos, John died by suicide at the age of 47. The news didn't make huge headlines at the time, and that says something. Here was a man who helped tell one of TV's most quietly radical love stories, and yet when he passed, it barely made a ripple. Friends and former colleagues described him as private, intense, and often deeply in his own head. There's no easy moral to draw, no scandal, no full explanation. Like so many stories connected to The Sopranos, the ending just lingers. Rest in peace, Johnny Cakes. Frankie Cortese wasn't a household name in the Sopranos universe, but real fans know he was there. Played by the late Tony Sirico, Frankie was often seen by Tony Soprano's side during the later seasons, usually behind the wheel of the Escalade or keeping an eye on things in the background. Tony Sirico, affectionately known as Goose, was a larger-than-life defensive tackle in the NFL, most famously with the Baltimore Ravens. Loud, hilarious, and impossible to ignore on or off the field. He was the kind of guy who could plug a gap and steal a scene. And after retiring from football, he parlayed that big personality into TV, not just as an analyst, but as an actor too. But like too many men from that world, football, bravado, holding it all in, Sirico didn't get to grow old. He died in 2022 at the age of 55. The cause was never officially confirmed publicly, but friends and colleagues spoke of health issues in the years prior, including heart problems. For fans of that 2000 Super Bowl team, it was a gut punch. What fans might not know is that Sirico once hosted a show called Man Caves on the DIY network, where he helped build dream spaces for regular guys. Big guy, big heart, helping guys carve out a little space in the world. Rest in peace, Goose. You were always part of the crew. You don't need a lot of screen time to make an impact on The Sopranos. Just ask Joseph Saravo. As Johnny Boy Soprano, Tony's father, Saravo played a ghost more than a character. He's not in every season, and when he is, it's through the hazy lens of flashbacks and family lore. But what he represents is enormous. The Root. The man who shaped Tony before Tony became Tony. Saravo's performance is controlled but menacing. He's not cartoonish or theatrical. He's the kind of guy who looks polite at a BBQ but flips a switch in a heartbeat. A real old-school wise guy. The kind you don't want to owe money to. Off-screen, Saravo was a trained stage actor with serious chops. He wasn't just a mob guy. He had Broadway credits. He taught acting. He played roles in everything from The People versus O.J. Simpson to Jersey Boys and Carlito's Way. But to Sopranos fans, he'll always be the looming presence in Tony's psyche. The reason he could never really escape who he was. In 2021, Joseph Saravo passed away after a long battle with prostate cancer. He was 64. His illness was kept mostly private until close to the end. A very old-school move in itself. He'd reportedly been diagnosed years earlier and kept working for as long as he could. Rest in peace, Joseph Saravo. If you're the type of Sopranos fan who remembers the look in someone's eyes more than their lines, then you know exactly who Butch DiConcini was and why Greg Antonacci made him so unforgettable. Butch wasn't a boss. He didn't have the charm of Little Carmine or the volatility of Phil Leotardo, but in many ways, he was the real power broker in the Lupertazzi family during the final arc of the show. Cold, calculated, never too loud, Butch was the kind of guy who didn't blink when it was time to flip the chessboard. And Antonacci played him with a bone-dry menace that always left us guessing. And here's something not every fan knows. Greg actually played real-life mobster Johnny Torrio in Boardwalk Empire, making him one of the rare actors to portray key figures in both of HBO's mob sagas. Antonacci died in 2017 of undisclosed causes. He was 70. There wasn't a media circus around it. No big retrospective package. But for those of us who paid attention, it hit hard. Because when you rewatch those final Sopranos episodes, you see a guy who absolutely understood what show he was in and how to carry weight without stealing the spotlight. Rest easy, Greg. Burt Young's appearance on The Sopranos was brief, but like everything he did, it left a mark. He played Bobby Bacalieri Sr., an old-school mobster brought out of retirement in Season 3 to carry out one final hit. Born Gerald Tommaso DeLuise in Queens, New York, Young had that unshakable working-class energy. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps, boxed professionally, and studied acting under Lee Strasberg, but never lost the street in him. He had his struggles too. Though not as public as some of his peers, there were rumors of battles with alcohol and a few run-ins over the years. But he was never a tabloid guy. He kept his private life tight. What showed through was the wear and tear and the honesty in every role he took. He didn't fake tough. He was tough. Burt Young passed away in 2023 due to cardiac arrest. No big media circus, just a quiet announcement, confirmed by his daughter. He was 83. It's fitting, in a way. In The Sopranos, Bobby Sr. dies alone in a car, slumped over the wheel. No final words, no tears, just a guy who did what he thought he had to do and paid the price. That scene, rewatch it now, or lands differently. There's something in the stillness of his death that feels almost personal. Maybe to the real Bobby Sr. You were only on The Sopranos for a minute, but like the best characters in that world, you made that minute count. If you blinked, you might have missed Frank Krishy on The Sopranos. He appears briefly in Season 4, Episode 4, The Wait. A sit-down is happening. Tensions are sky-high. Johnny Sack is ready to go to war over a fat joke made about his wife. And in that small moment, Frank Krishy, played by Richard Bright, shows up as part of the Atwell Avenue Boys. Most fans didn't know the name Frank Krishy, but they knew Richard Bright, whether they realized it or not. He was Al Neri in the Godfather trilogy. You know the guy who silently walks into a room and suddenly everyone is in danger? That was Neri, Michael Corleone's most trusted, dead-eyed enforcer. In real life, Bright dealt with his own share of hard roads. He also continued working on stage and in television, appearing on such shows as Law and Order, Oz, and Third Watch. These later performances showed Bright using an oxygen tank in all these appearances. Although he suffered from emphysema, the tanks were props for the characters. His death, though, was heartbreakingly sudden and senseless. In February 2006, Richard Bright was struck and killed by a tour bus while crossing the street near his Upper West Side apartment. He was 68. No criminal charges were filed, though the bus driver's license was suspended for failing to yield the right-of-way to Bright, who had been in a marked crosswalk with the walk sign on at the time he was struck. Acting wasn't about fame for him. It was about craft. Rest easy, Richard. You played the game your way. Played by the late John Hurd, Makazian was a crooked Newark vice cop, deep in debt, chain-smoking his way through a slow-motion breakdown. A minor character, yes, but a truth-teller. And in The Sopranos, those guys never last long. In real life, John Hurd had that same raw energy. Smart, unpredictable, and sometimes self-destructive. He was already a familiar face to most viewers by the time The Sopranos aired, thanks to roles in Home Alone, Big, Cutter's Way, and The Pelican Brief. But while he had a steady career, Hurd also struggled. He had a turbulent personal life, including multiple divorces, legal trouble, and periods where Hollywood didn't seem to know what to do with him. He died of cardiac arrest in 2017 at age 71, just days after back surgery. He was found in a Palo Alto hotel room. Like Makazian's, no dramatic showdown, just gone. There's a line Vin Makazian says in his last appearance that sticks with me. Sometimes it's good to cry. It releases the pressure valve. Tony doesn't listen. Maybe Vin was talking to himself. Rest easy, John. Paulie Walnuts. You heard the swish of his tracksuit before he turned the corner. Tony Sirico made Paulie unforgettable because he brought real-world weight to the role. He wasn't acting like a wise guy. He'd been around them. Paulie was a mix of menace and comedy, superstition and swagger. He was the guy who'd beat a waiter half to death over a bad tip, then get spooked by a cat staring at him. But off-screen, Sirico's final chapter was a quieter, lonelier one. After years of declining health, he died in July 2022 at the age of 79. No official cause was made public, but friends had noticed his memory slipping. What stings for a lot of fans, especially those who grew up watching him, is how he died. Not in a mansion in Jersey surrounded by friends and fellow actors, not at a glitzy Hollywood send-off. He was in an assisted living facility in Fort Lauderdale, surrounded by strangers, most of them also dying. With that signature Pauly strut, it's a tough image to sit with. One lesser-known fact, Sirico only agreed to do the show if David Chase promised Pauly would never turn rat. That wasn't negotiable. For a man with his past, playing a snitch was a line he wouldn't cross. Chase agreed, and Pauly stayed loyal, at least officially. Tony Sirico didn't get a big send-off, but he gave us a character who'll live forever. He made Pauly timeless. Rest in peace, Tone. No more ghosts. Paul Herman's portrayal of Beansy in The Sopranos gave us something rare in that world. A small-time wise guy who was genuinely trying to leave the life behind. He ran a pizza joint, kept a low profile, and tried to make an honest buck. But of course, in the Sopranos universe, no one ever really gets to walk away clean. Fans will never forget his brutal encounter with Richie the Jacket in Season 2. Richie shows up, demanding tribute, and when Beansy brushes him off, Richie retaliates with a pot of hot coffee to the face, followed by a savage beating with his own car. The next time we see Beansy, he's in a wheelchair. Permanently. Paul Herman died on March 29, 2022, his 76th birthday. The cause of death was not made public. And honestly, it didn't need to be. The outpouring of love from his longtime friends and collaborators, Robert De Niro, Michael Imperioli, Debbie Mazar, told you everything you needed to know. Paul Herman wasn't just playing a connected guy. He was connected, in a way. Not to the mob, but to the scene. He ran the legendary Columbus Cafe in New York during the 80s, a hangout for actors, gangsters, cops, and degenerates alike. Rest in peace, Paul. If you've watched The Sopranos, you don't forget Phil Leotardo as the boss of the Lupertazis. Uncle Philly was the kind of character who demanded attention whenever he appeared on screen. Played by Frank Vincent, Phil's cold, calculating nature made him one of the most memorable and menacing figures in the Sopranos universe. Off-screen, Vincent's life mirrored some of the gravitas of his roles, though not always in the ways you might expect. Frank had his share of health struggles, particularly heart issues. In 2017, after undergoing heart surgery, he passed away from complications related to the procedure. He was 80 years old, or at least that's what was officially recorded. Director John Gallagher, who worked with Frank on Street Hunter and The Deli, once revealed that the actor had actually lied about his age to avoid age-related discrimination in the industry. That's why many sources list his birth year as 1939, even though he was born earlier. And then there's this moment, one of the few times Tony opens up to Phil in the series. Listen to me, now I never told nobody this, but while I was in that coma, something happened to me. I went to some place, I think, but I know I don't ever want to go back there. And maybe you know what I'm talking about. Believe me, nobody ever laid on their deathbed wishing they saved more no-show jobs. You take your time, you get better, you get out of this fucking place, and when you do, focus on grandkids, the good things. You can have it all, Phil, plenty for everybody. That line hits different now. Rest easy, Frank. Carmine Lupertazzi Sr. was a key figure on The Sopranos, representing the old guard of the mafia. As the head of the Lupertazzis, his influence was felt throughout the series, even as he remained in the shadows. Played by Tony Lip, Carmine exuded a quiet authority, offering a contrast to Tony Soprano's more brash approach. His memorable moments, particularly his tense exchanges with Tony, highlighted the generational divide in the mafia and the evolving nature of power within this thing of ours. Tony Lip, born Frank Anthony Vallelonga Sr., was a seasoned actor with a career spanning decades, including roles in The Godfather, Donnie Brasco. Beyond acting, Lip had worked as a driver and bodyguard for Don Shirley, offering a rich, real-world authenticity to his on-screen presence. Tony Lip passed away on January 4th, 2013, at the age of 82. The cause of death wasn't disclosed, but he had been in poor health for years. His death marked the loss of a true Hollywood legend, one whose legacy endures both in his roles and the stories he shared from his own life. Robert Loggia's turn as Fitch LaManna on The Sopranos was pure, unfiltered fire. The moment he came onto the scene, you knew he was trouble. A throwback to the old-school mobster who doesn't play by the rules, constantly pushing buttons, challenging Tony's authority. But behind the tough exterior was an actor who knew how to leave an impression without ever having to scream for it. Loggia's portrayal was subtle, yet intense. He didn't need to steal every scene. He just had to make sure you were paying attention, and you were. When Robert Loggia passed away in 2015, at the age of 85, it hit hard. He died after a 5-year battle with Alzheimer's disease, a cruel end for a man who had always projected strength and presence. One of his final performances was a heartfelt cameo in Independence Day: Resurgence, 2016, where he reprised his role as General William Gray. The scene was filmed shortly before his death, and he appeared alongside his real-life wife, Audrey. The film was released posthumously and dedicated to his memory. Rest in peace, Robert Loggia. You'll always be the guy who brought fire and complexity to a role that could have easily been just another gangster. Instead, you made Fitch LaManna unforgettable. Nancy Marchand's portrayal of Livia Soprano in The Sopranos is unforgettable. Livia wasn't just Tony's manipulative mother. She was the psychological force that shaped him, embodying emotional abuse and familial dysfunction. Her chilling line, "I never wanted to be a mother," perfectly encapsulated her complex character. Marchand was a seasoned stage actress before her role in The Sopranos, having earned acclaim for her performances in Broadway productions like The Price and The Heiress. She brought a subtle yet powerful intensity to Livia, making her one of TV's greatest antagonists. Sadly, Nancy Marchand passed away from lung cancer on June 18, 2000, just before the second season aired, at the age of 71. Her declining health led to Livia's absence in the later seasons, a loss that mirrored Tony's struggle with his mother's influence. The irony of Tony wishing Livia would just die already hits harder, knowing the actress was facing her own battle. Paul Mazursky's cameo in The Sopranos was blinking you'll miss it, but still unforgettable. He played Sunshine, the poker dealer during one of the show's early high-stakes card games, calmly managing the table while Tony, Silvio, and Davey Scatino traded chips and tension. But that tiny role was just a flicker in a remarkable career. Mazursky was a giant behind the camera, a writer, director, and actor who helped shape American cinema in the 70s and 80s. With films like Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, An Unmarried Woman, Moscow on the Hudson, and Down and Out in Beverly Hills, he mastered the art of blending sharp social commentary with humor and humanity. What really struck me as a Belarusian myself is that Mazursky's grandfather came from Kobrin, then part of the Belarusian SSR. Today, modern Belarus. It's always powerful to discover that someone with roots in your homeland helped shape global cinema. Mazursky went into cardiopulmonary arrest and died on June 30th, 2014. He was 84. Rest in peace, Paul Mazursky. Whether behind the camera or dealing cards in a smoky backroom, you made every moment count. If you made it this far, thank you. I'm really glad you stuck around for this episode of Vano VHS. These actors meant a lot to all of us, and it means even more that you took the time to remember them If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We've got more deep dives coming your way. And if you want to know what happened to the cast members who are still with us, check out our next episode, The Sopranos. Where are they now? Some got arrested, some vanished from the screen. And a few, you won't believe the careers they've chosen. See you there.